This is Joseph Bolitho Johns, wearing a kangaroo skin cape and holding a tomahawk in his left hand. This was taken somewhere in Western Australia way back during the 19th century, and it is the only photo of him. This only resurfaced in 1998 when a second edition of a book was impending to be published called Moondyne Joe, The Man and the Myth. As you can tell, the name Moondyne Joe wasn't his real name. He adapted this later in his life so he could mask his identity after being hunted by the police for escaping prison multiple times. Although most of his life story happened in Australia, he was born in Cornwall, England in 1826. He grew up in a middle-class household and had 5 other siblings. At only 7 years old, his father died, and so, to support the family, he and his 3 other brothers went on to work as copper miners. Eventually, in 1848, he migrated to Wales to find a higher-paying job there, and he landed work as an iron ore miner. But this was where he also began his journey as a convict. He met John Williams, and one night in November, Joseph and John broke into a house and stole various items. They mostly took foods, specifically 3 loaves of bread, 1 piece of bacon, and several cheeses. They left the place around 2:20 a.m. Then 15 minutes later, 2 police officers spotted them walking on the trail. Of course, they found them suspicious since they were walking so early in the morning. The officers first questioned them, but as their conversation went on, they were not satisfied with their answers, so they inspected them and found the foods they had stolen. At that time, however, the police officers didn't know that these were stolen goods, so they just decided to let them go. But the following morning, Richard Price, the owner of the house that was burglarized, reported the incident to the police. He specifically mentioned the foods that were stolen from his house: 3 loaves of bread, 1 piece of bacon, and several cheeses. Immediately, the police officers who inspected Joseph and John last night tracked them down and arrested them. During the trial, both of them denied of such doing. They argued that it was pure coincidence. Although it was obvious that they stole the goods, they still refused to admit it. Normally, they would only be put away for a few months in prison, but since they kept on insisting that they didn't do it, the judge sentenced them to 10 years in penal servitude. From here, the 2 were sent to Western Australia as convicts. Even though Joseph was known to be a great escape artist most people now know today, he in fact didn't escape his first time he was arrested. In 1853, 5 years in serving his prison sentence, he was pardoned due to good behavior and became a free man. For the next couple of years, he remained under the radar. He mostly lived in the Avon Valley and made a living catching animals to sell them. At this point, you would think he's now a changed man, but no. In 1861, he stole a horse and was then later arrested. Now, this was the first time he escaped. That same night that he was arrested, he broke the hinges of the cell door and got out. He then stole the same horse that was just outside the jailhouse, and to put salt into the injury, he also stole the sheriff's saddle and bridle and then cruised away. He was at large for 2 days until he was tracked down. When he was arrested, the horse wasn't with him. They wanted to charge him for stealing an officer's horse and its equipment, which was a big deal at the time, and could put him inside for a long time. While it was quite obvious that he stole the horse, the authorities didn't have solid evidence to prove this in court. In truth, though, Joseph actually killed the horse and disposed of all the equipment because he knew the police were after him. Without any evidence, he was only put to 3 years of penal servitude. Again, much like how he was first arrested, he served his sentence, but luckily for him, he was given a pardon, and his sentence was cut short because of his good behavior. There was an incident where the other prisoners bolted their way out of the prison while he stayed still inside his cell despite the huge opportunity to be free again. To reward him for his behavior, they released him months after without doing the full sentence. This time, Joseph was sure he wanted a new life and never wanted to go back into jail again. He found work as a charcoal miner and made a living. However, in 1865, he was arrested for killing a farmer's ox. In court, Joseph denied doing it and insisted that someone set him up for it. Again, there was no proof and Joseph was accused of the crime. In the end, even with no evidence, he was charged up to 10 years of penal servitude. Filled with frustration, Joseph felt unjust with the whole situation. Inside prison, he befriended other cellmates, and together they worked to establish an escape plan. During the time when they were scheduled to pickaxe rocks outside the yard, Joseph and his group silently bolted their way out when the officers were not looking. The group stayed together for a couple of months. They committed small robberies to various communities. And it was at this point when Joseph changed his name to Moondyne Joe. Of course, even if he changed his name, he was still recognizable. So he got a new cut, shaved his facial hair, and added a couple of pounds to have a completely new look. Whenever they committed crimes, he would always wear a mask and always introduced himself to his victims as his alias. Unfortunately for him, that same year, he was arrested again and charged with possession of a firearm. Good thing though he wasn't on the act of robbing somebody, so he only received 1 year of prison. Back to the cell and determined to get out again, he tried breaking the locked doors, but he was caught and received an additional 6 months of his sentence. But this didn't matter to him, since his main goal was to escape as soon as possible. A few weeks later, he did the same act, and now this time, he did it at night when the guards were less alert. After a couple of hours, he successfully managed to cut free from the iron bars and escape his cell. The interesting thing about this is that when the police investigated the cell, they were left confused. They were not sure how exactly he broke through the iron bar. He didn't leave any evidence. After this escape, he met up with his old gang and recruited more members to continuing robbing people. Just like before, they committed small robberies, earning a quick buck. But soon enough, they wanted to do something bigger and planned a huge heist. They robbed one of the biggest store supplies and were successful. However, this alerted the police, and a lot were dispatched just to catch them. Eventually, one of the police discovered a significant track which led them to their location. In the end, they were ambushed, and all the members were arrested. Governor John Hampton created a special escape-proof cell just for him, since he caused so much trouble to the community and made the police and prisoner guards look foolish with all of his previous escapes. The cell was a small cubicle with only one barred window, and it was made with strong wood to prevent him forcing his way out. Also, on top of that, to make it really impossible for him to escape, they put a neck shackle on him. To make things harder for him, he was not allowed to use utensils in fear of him using it to break the iron bars. Thus, he was only allowed to eat bread and drink water. Now, in terms of how he would take a piss or take a number 2, he was given a small bucket with the small wooden plank to cover it. The guards would then only replace this once every 2 weeks. The governor was so confident in this cell that he even publicly announced that he'll give him a full pardon and drop all of his cases if he managed to escape from it. He said to him, "If you get out again, I will forgive you." Unfortunately for him, Joseph managed to escape from this, and here's how he did it. It actually has nothing to do with breaking the neck shackles or the cell. It was all well planned. After a few weeks, Joseph started to get sick inside. I mean, combining the horrid smell and poor nutritional value he got every day, this was bound to happen. So they removed him from the cell, and since they didn't have any doctors to check up on him, the guards just sent him to pickaxe some rocks on the yard in hopes his sickness would go away after exercising. They placed him at the corner of the yard near the wall and had a guard on site. But here's where Joseph took advantage of the situation. Near the area where he was pickaxing, there was a pile of rocks, and when he goes behind it, he loses the line of sight of the guard. At first, the guard shouted at him not to go behind the pile of rocks since he couldn't see him. But Joseph explained to him that he needed to go to that spot to pickaxe more rocks. Soon after some back and forth, the guard allowed him to continue. At this point, Joseph took his pickaxe and swung a hole small enough for him to crawl through. The wall, which was made out of fermentable limestone, was an easily breakable material, and the pickaxe was good enough to damage it without making too much noise. But before he crawled out, he stabbed his pickaxe on the ground, making it upturned. He then removed his jacket, pants, and hat and placed it on the pickaxe, making a scarecrow. So in short, he escaped in his underwear. Technically, Joseph didn't escape from the cell, and for that, he wasn't granted the pass for freedom. The police started a huge manhunt to find him, but Joseph kept a very low profile. He didn't do any more crimes and mostly wore hats whenever he went out. He did this for 2 years until his urge to steal again came back. He was caught stealing wine and was then put in prison for 1 year. From here on, after his big escape in the special proof cell, he was in and out of prison for minor offenses. He tried escaping, but none were successful. Today, many books are written about him, and he is now considered one of Western Australia's legends.